Hey, Professor Breckeisen here, and this is your yo-yo for week 4. We're going to be discussing how to conduct market research using qualitative methods. So in week 4, just go ahead and click here to the this first link here to conduct market research, and that will get us into the presentation. All right, so make sure you do your quantitative research quiz. Do that one on your own. We're going to talk about these two things today, but in this video, just the fundamentals of qualitative research and creative media, and we'll talk a little bit how this applies to your homework. Remember, all of this is going towards your first project, which is the first half of your project for this class, the presentation, and this all ties into the niche identification and audience research so that you can make sure that you have a project that's actually going to work and be feasible. So in this lecture, we're going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about problem statements, hypotheses, and frameworks. We're going to look at identifying the problem statement, hypotheses, and frameworks in this process as well. So qualitative research and what it is. So qualitative research is a little bit different than our quantitative research. Qualitative research is a method it uses to explore and understand underlying motivations, attitudes, and behaviors, which is not something that you can typically get from quantitative research. So we're really looking at not the numbers of things, but the why of things. So in quantitative research, remember, we collected numerical data with different instruments. We use surveys, experiments, right, statistical analysis. Any of those things are going to work out and be just fine. You try to test relationships of variables to see what those variables are. Are there a correlation between age and income? Is there a correlation between age and gaming use? Is there a correlation between income and podcast subscription fees and things like that? You're oftentimes going to use a large sample size because you need a larger sample size for that kind of work. You're going to use a lot of statistical analysis, which if you don't like doing, there's platforms online or people that can help you. And you use this to really create generalized, broad information for your populations. Like the majority of people have these kinds of results, is what you're going to do. But in qualitative research, it's a little bit different. You're going to use non-numerical data, right? We're going to look at things like text and images. We're going to talk to people, actually have conversations, and gather those things down through interviews and focus groups and things like that. What we want to do is we want to focus on and look at a phenomenon that people are experiencing. We want to know the why or the experience that people have or had in order to understand maybe motivations a little bit more, ideas a little bit more, things like that. Smaller sample sizes. Sometimes your sample in this world can be just one if you're using like a case study. Instead of using statistical analysis, you're going to do what's called coding, and it's a process of going through to pretty much determine how everyone's, we have a shared language, but it's not 100% the same. Everyone talks different, uses different words, expresses themselves a different way, describes things a little bit differently. And so you're looking for those patterns to see, okay, this is a one-to-one, even though this person used these words and this person used those words. So it can be a little bit more challenging. And what we're doing is we're trying to be a little bit more specific to smaller populations. We talked before about categorical versus numeric numbers, right? We also have this same process in qualitative data. So when we're conducting interviews with gamers to understand their preferences for a video game, we can use categorical and numerical data. We can look at their age, we can look at segmentations, we can analyze discussions and uncover trends in fan communities for a television series, for example. And by using categorical or number or putting these responses into one of these two categories, we can really explore the why and how behind the phenomenon. We can use this for understanding complex, subjective, or content dependent aspects. Everyone experiences things differently, so we want to try to figure out what that means more collectively, even though it's a little bit more individualized. We want to use open-ended questions. Yes, no questions are oftentimes not the best, but tell me about a time when, how are you, what are your thoughts on, how do you feel about this kind of thing are great questions. Involves identifying themes and patterns in the data. So again, that's that coding part where it's not going to be like super obvious, but you got to go in there and kind of determine those things for yourself. This is an iterative process. People change their mind, opinion, views very rapidly and very easily depending on the context and what's going on. And then it's a subjective, researcher-dependent discipline, so reflectivity is critical and crucial on your behalf. So we're using a lot of these same kind of terms, but we're going to be applying them in a different way. Before we can actually start getting into our research, and this goes for qualitative and quantitative, we need to understand and find a framework that is going to drive our research so that we're not kind of starting over from scratch. We're not thinking about things without having some guidelines with them. So with frameworks, I want to kind of take a step back and start with objectives. You need to have some kind of an objective with your research. So what do you want to achieve through your qualitative research? Even your quantitative research, you'll need to have some kind of objective. And then the frameworks are going to provide a theoretical foundation for your study. And if you remember from our conversation last week, we started to talk about a lot of these examples I would give in class sound very redundant. And that's because there's just a strict alignment with different things that we're going to be talking about. And that's going to be the same in this case as well. And you're going to see that the framework is going to be kind of like the container that helps us to keep those things aligned and points us in the right direction to get the correct information that we want. When you're going to create an objective, you want to start thinking about the topic that you're doing, that you're looking at. Sometimes you might not even know what the topic is, and really thinking about and studying and narrowing that down is going to be important. Researching that topic, making sure that you're not just guessing, that you have all the available information out there for you, and then you're looking for gaps and going, but I found all this information, but this information I don't have. Maybe I need to start asking some questions. And then that's what's going to help you develop your research problem. If there's already the answer out there and you can just find it on the internet or use ChatGPT and it's not hallucinating and giving you wrong information, then why do you even need to study? But maybe you found information that was really great about a population in another state, another country, another city, and you're going specifically to somewhere and you're like, I want to see if I can get the same data if this tracks from one place or to the other. So once you have that and you know exactly what you want to research, finding a framework can be pretty simple, even though there's a very large amount of them out there. But I'll show you some tricks to be able to find some easy ways to find the right one that you're going to want. These frameworks provide a structural approach, so they're kind of like going to walk you through the process, makes it so much easier. You're going to have that consistency in decision making and execution because you're not kind of winging it through the whole process. And oftentimes they incorporate best practices and lessons learned from previous experiences, especially if this framework is 5, 10, 20, 80, 100 years old. Sometimes those provide very rock solid frameworks to work with. So let's look at how this works with some examples. The first one is a podcast. We're going to look at they're trying to do some retro things on podcast. Through their research and trying to find their theme and their problem, they found that investigating the role of nostalgia and the popularity of retro-themed podcasts. That's their problem. They don't know what the role of nostalgia is in these retro-themed podcasts. So they have an objective to understand how nostalgia-based content and podcasts influence listener engagement and emotional connection. Okay, can you start to see that alignment coming back into this? So they're going to draft a hypothesis, right? We talked about hypotheses last time, but let's look at this hypothesis. Do nostalgic elements in retro-themed podcasts enhance listener engagement and emotional connection, leading to the formation of stronger bonds with content that resonates with listeners, personal memories, and experiences from the past? So that's kind of the basis of their hypothesis, and so their hypothesis will be yes or no, right? Depending on what they want to study. So they're going to sit there and say, yes, this is happening, and we're going to try to study it. So they need to find a framework, and the framework's going to align from that alignment. It's going to continue that train of thought. They're not going to go out and find something that's finance related or something that is color theory related, but they're going to look at things like cultural memory studies, and there's going to be a framework for that. Or emotion regulation theory, right? How nostalgia, in the podcast specifically, serves as a tool for regulating emotions, helping listeners cope for stress and uncertainty. These things exist. Also, audience reception theory can be a really good one, investigating how different listener segments engage and interpret what is going on in the podcast. So these frameworks are very much tied to everything else that they've been looking at. It's going to provide them a very good resource to be able to go through that study. Another one is a VR company, right? They want to, their problem that they, in order to solve it, they're going to be analyzing the impact of virtual reality on player immersion and presence in video games. We're not really sure what the player immersion is and the presence in video games. Do they really feel like they're there? Are they actually, is their suspension of disbelief even close to being suspended? And how does that actually work? So the objective is to assess how VR technology enhances the sense of presence and immersion in gaming experiences. And so their hypotheses, the question that's leading to their hypothesis, is how do players perceive and describe their experiences of immersion and presence in video games when using virtual reality technology? So they're going to want to find a framework that might help them to identify what that hypothesis is going to be. So in this case, they find presence theory, right? It's the concept of being present, examining how that actually works, and specifically in an AR, or in this case, a VR world. Technology acceptance models is one of my favorite frameworks. It helps us to understand how people perceive the usefulness and ease of use of technology. Maybe the fact that it's cumbersome and it's not easy to use kind of destroys the illusion that I'm in a place, right? One of these days we might get into a world where all of our VR happens through contact lenses. Seems kind of sci-fi, but sci-fi always seems to find a way to make itself happen. And that's probably going to be a better experience than today, but let's look at how people are experiencing this today. And then cognitive load theory, which is a theory, it's actually a learning theory, it's really good. It's about how we process new information and engage with that new information before we get overly stimulated and feel like we're no longer part of that experience. So all three of these can be very good frameworks to start with in order to understand the phenomenon that they're trying to look at. Last one is looking at a film company looking at ratings, and they want to investigate the impact of film ratings and content warnings on viewer preferences and perception of movie quality. Right? This is a question that's gone on for ages, and it actually really started back in the 90s with a show that was called Jackass. And this was on, I think it was on MTV at the time. It might have been on other places. I know it went to MTV eventually. But one of the things that they did beautifully is they started every episode with a warning. Do not attempt these. You will get hurt. And only stupid people do the stuff that you're about ready to watch. Opening credits. That was not a warning. That was a rally cry for people who wanted to watch that kind of material. And that was the kind of content that was being created before we had, a lot of YouTube stuff where that's all we ever kind of watch now, like Fail Army and stuff like that. It's just people doing stupid stuff, getting hurt. But that was our one way of looking at that back in those days. Using that warning at the beginning was a tool to attract attention and probably get out of any legal trouble. But we found out really quickly that that was there. But what about your favorite graphic novel? If your favorite graphic novel came out and it has an NC-17 rating versus an R rating, is that going to change your mind? Is it going to change your mind if it's a PG rating? Some people are going to be like, no, my graphic novel needs to be graphic, and we need to see the rating that's appropriate to that. So that's what they're kind of looking at. So they want to understand how film ratings and content warnings influence viewer choices, satisfaction, and perceptions of movie quality. And then the question they have is, do film ratings and content warnings significantly influence viewer preferences, satisfaction, and perceptions of movie quality, suggesting that the viewers are more likely to select and rate movies favorably when exposed to specific ratings and warning information. So what are some frameworks that we can use here? Well, we can go back to social cognitive theory, which is a little bit different than cognitive load theory, but social cognitive theory is kind of how we all work together and think and share these things. So it can be applied to these studies on how groups think about these things. We can look at cultural studies frameworks, looking at the social cultural context in which these films and the ratings operate. Preferences and perceptions of the quality of these things can always come through cultural studies. Then the other one is going to be consumer behavior frameworks. Are people actually motivated or moving to actually consume this media based off of some of these observations that we have or questions that we have? So these frameworks are actually pretty good. All right, so let me move this out of the way. and then come into here for just a second. And I'm just going to show you kind of where to go to find some frameworks. So I went into just Google and I typed in list of theoretical frameworks. And I got just this University of Washington post here. It's got a bunch of different things that are kind of telling us what these frameworks are. And at the bottom, it's really nice that it gives us a bunch of frameworks down here that we can work with. I don't know if any of these are going to be good. They're just kind of compiled from whoever compiled them on this website. Sometimes you're going to get hit or miss, and you're going to get something that's going to work out. So your general Googling could work out for you. Other sites exist out there where they kind of aggregate and collect theories. One of my favorite is this Learning Theories. As an educator, we look at theories all the time. And down here we've got a bunch of theories that are bullseye in the center of education and some that are kind of tangential and work with education. So cognitive bias, cognitive theories, right? These things, motivation theories, mental models, paradigms and perspectives, social learning theories. These are all probably really good categories to look at. Identity theories could be really related to education. Humanist theories, descriptive theories. They're kind of getting a little bit outside the absolute bullseye, but they're all listed here and they're nice. If I go to social learning theories, you'll see here that they've got situated learning theory, stereotype threat, Bandura, right? We're looking at all these different theories. And you can use any of these theories to work with. Luckily, you don't have to go and find these and hopefully get the gold mine of the theories that are going to be related to you and what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You can do something like go to ChatGPT. And I just asked, I'm doing research on video game culture and time people spend playing games versus doing physical activity. My goal is to create more mobile games that promote health and make people move more. Think of Pokemon Go, especially outside. Can you list 10 frameworks that can help me? Self-determination theory would be great. Uses and gratification theory would be good. Health benefit model, I'm not really sure what that one is, so I'd look into that, but it sounds, on the name, it sounds pretty good. Theory of planned behavior is very good. Social cognitive theory, we looked at that one already. Gamification frameworks could be pretty cool to look at. And flow theory is pretty good. Technology acceptance model, this one's just going to kind of show up a lot with, especially if you're using technology or the use of technology. And other ones that are here, you can ask for more lists if you need to, depending on the needs of your study. So you're not kind of in the dark. You're not out there trying to just waffle around and find something. Use these tools to find the ones that you want. Be as descriptive as possible if you're using an AI system, and double check that they're not giving you any hallucinations. Sometimes they just make stuff up. So once you get your framework and you're able to do your study, you got your questions that you want to ask. You're going to actually have to go out and collect some data to see what the answers are to the questions. And we can do this through a lot of different ways, just like we did with Quantitative. So we're going to be collecting data from participants or sources. That's the typical word in academia. You're going to be interviewing people. You're going to be asking questions. You're going to be doing things like surveys. These are open-ended surveys. We talked about surveys last week, but that was more like a Likert scale, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you prefer this? On a, yes or no questions. But this is going to be surveys that are going to be tell me about an experience when, or things like that. They're going to be a little bit more open-ended, and they're going to actually write paragraphs. You can do focus groups. We can get people together, circle around a table, start to ask questions, start to get understanding through of different people. We can do a content analysis, participant observation, right? Just case study, for example. I'm going to follow this one person around for the next 3 months and see how they adapt and how they, work with their mobile games or something like that. You can do content analysis, doing some systematic examination of either textual, visual, or audio components, our content for your platforms. And then you're going to want to use what is called triangulation, and that's combining multiple methods to be able to get a comprehensive view. Sometimes we like to do more than one study to make sure that it's not just some offshoot. If we got 2 studies pointing in the same direction, we feel like it's a little bit more concrete that we're going to have some good answers going on, and even 3 to get true triangulation. So what are some of these areas of research that we're going to look at? So here's a couple of them. So if you're not really sure what to do, just come back to this slide, select some from here. That's going to work perfect for what you're trying to do. Ethnography, right, is immersing the researcher in a culture or community being studied. Maybe I want to go and see how people examine and work and interact at a Comic-Con. And I'm actually just going to go to the Comic-Con and just start observing people and taking notes and seeing how people react. Maybe I'll have something there for them to react to, a poster or some kind of booth. And I want to see how people's reaction are to it. If they come over, play the game, look at it weird, scratch their head, throw tomatoes at it, whatever they're going to do, right? You can conduct interviews. That's kind of easy. Focus groups. We talked a little bit about that too. The case study is I'm going to follow this one person or one company or one family, right, for a little while, but it's kind of like one unit of a participant. Content analysis. Grounded theory is really great for when you don't really have a perfect theory, so you're going to maybe develop your own. It's kind of difficult. It takes a long time, but this is where it starts. And then phenomenology is we're trying to look at exploring human experiences that people have had. So a lot of phenomenological research was done after September 11th, for example. They wanted to see if you lived in New York on that day, what was the phenomenon that you experienced? Now let's compare that to somebody who lived in Los Angeles, which is completely on the other side of the country, somebody in Hawaii who's even further, somebody in Kuwait, which is on like the opposite side of the world. So we want to see how those phenomenons relate. So here's some examples. We're looking back at our three that we just talked about. This is our retro podcast. Their hypothesis of a question that they're asking themselves is, do nostalgic elements in retro-themed games or podcasts enhance listener engagement and emotional connection? That's really what they're looking for in order to have that stronger bond with the content. And so they chose to use focus groups and one or two of the frameworks from earlier. And they're going to conduct these focus groups and discuss with the participants anything that they can talk about that's going to be nostalgic related. They're going to talk about retro themed podcasts, how they affect engagement, emotional connection. They can start to have those insights from the people that they can actually talk to. The VR company, right? How do players perceive and describe their experiences of immersion and presence in a video game? Well, maybe instead of doing a focus group with a lot of people where they're like, oh yeah, I remember that, we're going to just talk to one person. Here's some questions. Let's go ahead and have a conversation about what this is. So we're just trying to get that isolated perspective from that one person. And then however many times we do that, 2, 6, 12, 100 people, then we can start to code and triangulate a little bit better to see what the data is. And the other one, and the last one here is the ratings. So as they're looking at do content warnings significantly influence viewer preferences, satisfaction, and perceptions. They're going to use analysis of viewer reviews and comments. They're going to find maybe films that were very appropriately labeled for like NC-17 or PG, and start to see, okay, are there any themes that start coming out of these comments that people post online that'll lead us to believe that they were dissatisfied with the rating system or it influenced them in some way? And then look at other ones that are obviously incorrectly or at least culturally people have said it's been incorrectly labeled or rated, and then see if that actually has any change to their behavior. So that's more of an analysis that you're not looking at bringing in participants, but they've already provided that personal subjective input through some kind of blog or Rotten Tomatoes or something. So sample sizes. We talked a little bit about sample sizes before. It's a little bit different now. Your sample sizes can be smaller with qualitative data. But I'm going to give you some more terms here on how to look at your sampling. So we can look at purposeful sampling, where we select participants based off of actual criteria. You're going to ask questions before the test, and then or before the interviews or whatever you're going to be doing. And you don't want to just pick people random. You want to pick people who've actually maybe have an interest in the area that you're talking about or experience the phenomenon. So if I was going to ask people born in 2006 about their experience at 9/11, That's not going to work because they were born after 2001. So that would be a very bad purposeful sampling. You can do snowball sampling, and this is where you use like a referral system, and you're like, hey, great, I'm glad that you talked to me about this. Do you have 3 friends that you feel would be great people to have this conversation with as well? And they can say, oh yeah, my friends, X, Y, and Z, they all kind of share same interests with me, connect with them, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. We talked about convenience sampling last week. The example I gave was in the classroom. Since you're all in the classroom, I can give you just a survey and ask you to fill that out. Well, I can also just use the students in the classroom and interview them. So if you have convenience sampling, that can work. It's not always the best one to use, but it's there. Theoretical sampling based on emerging theories during the data analysis. So things that start popping up tell you to kind of attack different segments of your sampling areas and then kind of approach them. Max variation sampling, selecting diverse cases to capture a wide audience and perspective, right? We want to make sure that we're not just asking everybody in this one class how their experience is on campus, but maybe we're going to pull samples from all the different colleges and get that because we want all the different perspectives from different people. Quota sampling, making sure that we have representation from various subgroups within a population. So if you're looking at age group differences or income differences or location-based differences, you might want to look at how to incorporate and include everybody in that. And then sampling saturation is stopping the data when you're not getting anything more. No one to turn off the system and to say that you've got all the data that you need. There's no use in interviewing 1,000 people when 5 people will do the trick for you. So once you get that data, you're going to collect it and you're going to have to start doing something with it. So how do you collect it? You're going to be systematically organizing and storing qualitative data using these methods mostly. So audio recordings, right, or written notes. You can do that too, field notes. You can even do videos other than audio now. It's a little bit easier, so you can get those. You can do transcripts. So if you did get an audio version and you need to put it into a transcript form, maybe you can put it into a computer so it'll help code for you. Data coding, we talked about that, trying to find those trends and themes throughout a discussed and subjective telling about what people are doing. And then you can also use software. There's some software that's out there that can help you to do this. So we're not done yet. I want to show you just an example of how some of this looks with my example from Fermata. But so far what we did today is we looked at all of these things, and we're getting a lot closer to being able to research and have a good idea that your idea is a good idea. This is just homework. Continue working on slides for weeks 2 through 4 in the presentation. And Fermata films. So Fermata films, right, we're looking at these actors, seeing if these reels are going to be important. So quantitative and qualitative plans are, we're going to look at audition reels and ask rates and surveys self-created that we're going to create. We're going to look at how many auditions do actors actually attend. Are they ever asked actually for these reels? We want to find out if that's actually something that people are asking for. Or were the participants that I talked to who said that they were complaining that this was happening, or maybe just isolated because this is one person that comes in from LA every week, and he's the only person that's asking these questions. We also want to know what the attitudes are for using a reel creation service, right? We want to ask the people doing the auditions, hey, if we have this and it's obviously it's not a finished film or a film that they've done somewhere else, it's a product that they bought to demonstrate themselves. Someone might be like, yes, please, something is better than nothing. And others are going to go, no, we need to have season. We need to see what they're like in the trenches on a real production. That's not going to give us all the information that we need. So we want to know what those attitudes are. On our qualitative plan, we're going to use focus groups and case studies. Our focus group is what are local filmmakers looking for when they watch an actor reel? Like what are they actually looking for? What can we do to service our actors better so that we can know what to include and avoid things that are not going to be in there? And then the case study, we're going to actually create a reel for an actor to see what kind of reaction that they get. Let's go ahead and bring someone in, a couple of people, maybe some actors. Let's do this one for free so we can give it to them. But we want to know what their reaction is. Do they feel like it was a good value? Do they feel like it's something they would actually pay for? Is it something they want to do again? Those kinds of things. On the next slide that you're going to see, we're going to look at, well, that's the one for Fermata Films. Here are a couple other examples that you can read on your own, just doing a roguelike game and then a documentary film to kind of help you to see that a little bit better. But those are there for you to reference in case you're still a little foggy, and hopefully they give you some more clues. All right, so that's all for this lecture. Thanks, and start thinking about how you can talk to your audiences, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye.